So Nicky, how are we doing on questions?
Um, we're getting right now there are 7 or 8 of them. I'll try to combine them as much as I can, and then in the end, the ones that we didn't answer yet, we can address them then. Felipe from Canadian Soccer Coaches Network asked a couple of questions. You asked, the first one is, do you impose your game model, so always the same in every club, or do you redesign it in every club environment? He asked a follow-up question: is your game model closed or a live organism that evolves all the time?
Brilliant questions, and you've stolen my thunder for later in the in the webinar and the presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Game models are defined by their environment because there are so many different things that you need to consider, and literally physical environment could be just one of those things. You want to play a game which involves lots of short passing, etc. You need to have a pitch where the ball isn't going to bobble around and you're going to lose that possession. If you happen to coach a team that plays in an area where that's going to be difficult, you might choose a game model to play longer passes and to play into different areas of the pitch. For me personally, I did two things. One, I wanted to develop a game model that I think the game should be played if you have the players that can do it, and that's the game model that I think is going to be most successful more often than not. I think it also is a reflection of my personality, that I want to attack. I was a striker when I was a player, love scoring goals. I always wanted to attack, and whenever I played, I got bored if all we did was defend. As a coach, I've matured though, and on more than one occasion, I've used a much more defensive approach to games, to win one-off games, particularly cup games where teams have been coaching, have been playing against higher opposition. And we know that player for player, those teams have been better than us. And so we've adopted a much more defensive approach where we have a team shape much more closer to West Ham's, although we didn't leave some of them spare on the opposite side, but we were much more compact, we were much more deep in our shape, and we look to score counterattacks. I'm actually planning on doing that for a game that's coming up shortly. I won't say who, and it's just in case they're watching, but I think it's an approach that can be really successful. It wouldn't be my game model long term though. Also, you have to think about what are the objectives of the club. If you're brought into a club maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 games before the end of the season, you've got to keep them up. You're not going to have time to implement an expansive, fast-flowing football game model in 8 games, for example. So you might choose to take on a much more simpler game model where you organise a defence. You become incredibly hard to beat, where every point is incredibly valuable, and maybe a draw would be a success at that point. So it's the amount of time that you're given at a particular team or club to get your particular game model across, the influence that the players have, the influence the environment have, the influence that what objectives there are in the coach, so a chairman or chairwoman might have on you as a coach as well. Lots and lots to talk about, which is what I said right at the start. Game model there's so much to it.
Okay, there are some more questions. Well, we'll try to, some of them I will try to answer by typing as well. But if you see as attendees, you see some of the questions, you think, oh, that's a really interesting question, I would want to ask the same one. You're able to, next to the question, to give it a thumbs up. So the questions that I see are very popular, that have several thumbs up, are the ones that will be asked definitely, and the other ones that will be, I will try to answer them by typing. If we don't get to all of them, the questions, we will later on, we can still try to answer your question by the email that we will send around. The next question that might be very interesting is from Cedric. He says, a very clear overview. You base your game model on top teams, but what if you are coaching a bottom team, mid-table team? What would you do different, or would you do everything the same?
It's a good question. It's a good question, Cedric. I think it's similar to Philippe's. It's would I adapt? And you absolutely have to adapt as a coach. And also, I think it's good for you as a coach to think of different game models, because by learning other game models, you learn how the opposition might play. Okay, so if the team that I'm coaching, if I only coach them to play one way, and then we come up against a team that causes us problems, I've done them a disservice as a coach. I've not given everything of my service to them to help them in that situation. Remember, right at the start, I said we want to make it predictable for us and unpredictable for them. To make it more predictable for us, we need to learn about other game models, and we also need to be able to change our game model based on the opponent and based on who we're playing at that time and what our objective is at that time. I've recently taken on a new role with a ladies team, and we're mid-season. I haven't been with them at all. We've got a competitive game in less than 2 weeks. So it's about 10 days. It's a Sunday week. To say to them, oh, this is how we're going to play. It's going to be really expansive. We're going to keep the ball. We're going to play really high press, and we're going to try and attack on the weak side in 10 days is just unrealistic. So during that time, we'll implement a tiny fraction of a game model. Again, I've got Nicky's assistance to do this as well, thankfully. We'll try and implement a tiny fraction of the game model, and the rest will be as simple as possible. And we'll look to win that game. It's important that we get off to a good start. So it's always, there's a phrase in England that we use called horses for courses. If you've got a team that can play like Man City, then play like Man City. If you've got a team that play like a team that's a local team and they don't have the ability to do that, but they still want to win, then you go ahead and you play of a game model that's best to them. I started off in my mind though as what is my ideal game model, and then I added different options for me to develop into, depending on whichever team I end up coaching.